Amen.
Paula, I heard that. I know he said he got it.
You're going to have to lead though, is that all right?
Is that a yes? I see a hand moving. Is that a yes? Give us a. Good afternoon, everyone. It's not quite afternoon. Again, I'm Dr. Paula Duren. I'm a psychologist by training, and I have the privilege of being the director of Universal Dementia Caregivers. And I always like to show why I do this work. Let's see if I can get this to move for me. That's my mom and dad. Mom and dad both had dementia-related illnesses. Mom had Alzheimer's and dad had vascular dementia. And as a result of that journey and supporting them, how many of you are caregivers or have been caregivers? You understand right now what I'm about to say was the hardest job that I've ever loved. I felt like I was given a gift to take care of them. Not everybody can do it. So if you've been successful, and that's not a negative, you need to know what you're capable of and ask for help. Because too many caregivers, guess what we forget to do? Take care of yourself as well as ask for help. And so one of the things I always found frustrating in terms of supporting my loved ones was taking them to the hospital, to the emergency room in particular. Anybody had that issue? It seems like I would wait forever. It felt like once they saw me and they saw that they had dementia, it's like, I'm not sure what to do. So I wanted to make sure that we brought a specialist here, and I told him he was the coolest looking doctor I've ever seen.
Thank you. I'm done here now.
But he told me, Dr. Phil told me that he runs the mobile unit for the whole state of Michigan.
Yeah, I'll get into that in a second.
And so he's out there, he's involved with the community, he's doing a number of things, and I wanted to bring him, and he said, well, can you make sure people have questions? And I'm just going to say to you, you guys have any questions up front about or complaints, because he might be able to fix some of that stuff too. And I want to turn it to his hands to say, what I'm impressed with is his willingness to connect to the community, his knowledge of this whole field, and he's connected with Wayne State. What does an endowed doctor mean?
That means I have some funds that are set aside that I can expend on whatever programs I want to, which is kind of nice. So yeah, people put money into an account, it earns interest, and I get to spend the interest on initiatives to help the community.
Outstanding. Let's give a warm welcome to Dr. I'm going to call you Dr. Phil and the rest of
You can call me anything you want, Dr. Duren. So thank you guys so much for allowing me to come into the congregation here and speak with you. I'm Philip Levy. I'm a professor of emergency medicine at Wayne State and also associate vice president for translational science. And I developed and direct the Wayne Mobile Health Unit program. So if any of you guys have ever come out to one of our mobile sites where we started providing COVID testing, moved into vaccines, and then transcended into what we call portable population health, where we can bring screening and other services directly into the community to make it easier for people to get the care they need from a prevention mindset. And as Dr. Duren mentioned, she has one parent with Alzheimer's and one parent with vascular dementia. Vascular dementia is all related to high blood pressure and diabetes and risk factors like that. So the sooner we identify people with high blood pressure and get it under control, the sooner we can prevent people from developing complications like small vessel disease and multi-infarct dementia and things that you've heard about. But my role here today is not to talk per se for myself, and that's why I don't have any slides or anything. It's to answer your questions. I've been an emergency physician for more than 25 years. I trained at Bellevue Hospital in New York City, and then I've been working at Detroit Receiving Hospital for 20 years plus since I've been here. I'm kind of a reformed emergency physician because I don't work much in the ER anymore. A lot of that is because I share the same frustrations you do when you go to the emergency department and experience those encounters. I know that I've been on both sides with my mom in the emergency department and being a doctor in the emergency department, and it's frustrating. It's frustrating as hell, especially after the pandemic, right? Things really have changed, and to some degree, the quality of care has deteriorated. But what more has deteriorated, from my perspective, is the quality of compassion, right? It seems like there's fatigue for compassion in the emergency department. And so I've really shifted my practice to be more in the community with mobile units. We now have 8 of these. We send 6 to 7 of them out a day, 6 to 7 days a week. We've worked with and screened more than 94,000 people. And we're on a mission to change healthcare so that folks don't have to develop complications because the system isn't there and being proactive and only waiting for people to come into the ERs with heart attacks and strokes and things. We want to get out ahead of this and prevent that so people can live well for as long as possible. So with that backdrop, I want you guys to ask questions, and here we go, nobody's shy. Okay, hopefully it's about my suit.
And my comment is that I've noticed, and you did mention the passion and caring for the elderly. In some instances, you go in, and because you're older, they look and, well, you've lived your life, and they just kind of put you over in the corner, and so that's really sad.
Yeah, I just want to touch on that, and I'll give you the microphone. And I know we're dancing in a little bit, so it's she's going to lead, though. I don't have the moves to lead. But this is true. And so one of the things that's actually happened, one of the movements is to create geriatric certified emergency departments. The American College of Emergency Physicians has been very aggressive in that so that that doesn't happen, right? So that we're not sitting there as a bunch of cowboy physicians waiting for the next big trauma to come in. And that's the perverse side of medicine, right? Someone else's misfortune is part of the excitement of the job, which is terrible to say, right? But you have to have individuals who are trained how to be compassionate, how to recognize challenges in the older, community and be ready for that before people come in. So someone doesn't get pushed into the corner and because they're quiet, may not speak as much, maybe a little uncomfortable. Maybe you're used to a different era in medicine, right? Where you did what your doctor said and until the doctor speaks, you don't do anything, right? And I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm just saying that's the way things were. Now everybody tweets in 240 characters and tells you what they want and, in as short a communication as possible. But specifically trained geriatric facilities are a way to address this. I'm going to hand this to you, and if you can hand it to that young lady after.
All right, this is another comment. I am a retired nurse, and so I can see this, and I remember that when I was working, we seemed to have more compassion than some of the newer nurses. I worked all over. I used to work for the Detroit Health Department, and I worked for Select Care Insurance Company, the Wellness Plan. My background is community health nursing, and I'm a graduate of Wayne State University time too. So.
We may be hiring you after this conversation. We always use a person like you on our team.
I had a comment and a question. My name is Pat, and I am a member of St. Patrick's Senior Center, and I have experienced that mobile health unit. We always have Wayne State nurses on staff there, and I have went through the process, and what I really like about it is you do a survey, they follow up, and they suggest programs for Wayne State, especially for diabetes, whatever area, so they always take that step further. But what I wanted to know is, for people that don't know about you, how can they find where you're located at? Because we know when we go to the seniors and the rec centers. But a lot of people outside of that don't know how they can get tested, unless they know somebody that goes and do these things. Thank you.
Well, you guys can always call me, 248-840-0169. Please take my number down, 248. You all write it down, that's right. 840-0169. And if you guys have any questions about where a mobile setting is, even if you have questions about care, I love to speak to people. As you can tell, I have fun with all of this, so please reach out at any time. But if you go to waynehealthcares.org, WAYNEHEALTHCARES, waynehealthcares.org, that'll take you to our website where we have a calendar of all of our screening events. We've been running television commercials for a little bit as well. They've been on XYZ and DIV in the past. We were doing iHeart Radio as well and doing radio spots. we're going to be starting that back up again very soon. But the real push that we're trying to do is make this an initiative across the state. So while we started with the Wayne Mobile Health Program and grew that, I'm now leading something called the Michigan Mobile Health Corps, which is this same idea to say in the future, prevention care, when you don't really need a specialist, you need someone like a community nurse who can engage people. That's where you start, right? We can measure blood pressure, measure lab tests, do what we need to do, and then follow up, connect with people, right? Make sure people have the understanding and the resources they need to get to that next step. But that next step can be in the community too. Community health workers, pharmacists on the vehicles, dispensing medications. There's no need for people to go through 3 or 4 steps to see a doctor, get lab test ordered. You guys all know this experience. You got to go to some lab center. Then you got to make an appointment to go back, and then you get a prescription. It's 5, 6 steps before you finally get what you need. We're trying to say, no, it just needs to be one. Come to a mobile unit, get your stuff done, come back tomorrow when we get the results, and we'll get those lab tests to you. But I think, I really want to hear some questions about care. Yes. Sure, Dr. Duren.
I want to bring my loved one. I'm taking my loved one to the emergency. I'm taking my loved one to the emergency room. What documents should I have with me so that I can make sure they're cared for properly?
Excellent. So I'm glad we're centering back on that. So oftentimes there's 2 things that really happen with demented patients in the emergency department. Sometimes we know it exists, and so you're bringing someone in because they're getting worse, they're getting sick, and we'll touch on that in a second, or they don't know you don't know they're demented yet. They're starting to lose their memory. They're starting to act a little funny. Things are not what they used to be, and you're very concerned. Most of the time, dementia is not an acute thing. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow deterioration. And one of the things we actually see a lot is when family members don't live in the state and they come home for Thanksgiving or Christmas and they haven't seen grandma for a while, and all of a sudden grandma's not acting the same, right? And so their instant response is, let's go to the emergency department and figure out what's going on. When that person comes into me or my colleagues, a lot of times our job is to figure out, is there an acute problem that led to this? So what types of things lead to older folks having challenges with their memory or acting a little bit weird? The distinction is between dementia, which is a generally irreversible process, although there are some new medications, and delirium. Have you guys heard those terms ever presented that way? Delirium is an acute and generally reversible problem, and dementia is a little bit more of a fixed problem, whether it's Alzheimer's or vascular. Those are the 2 causes of dementia. So what we're trying to do, if there's no known history, is understand, is this person delirious? And I don't mean that in the Prince sense, right? The song, you guys all know that, right? I mean really in the sense of, are they confused because they have an infection? Oftentimes in older folks, the infections are in the urine. So urinary tract infections are a big issue. Dehydration, malnutrition. Those types of things are what we look at. There could also be intracranial problems. There could be tumors. There could be bleeds. There could be all sorts of things. So our job as ER docs, when we don't know what's going on, is to figure out, is this reversible or is this not? If somebody's got dementia and we've ruled out delirium, there's not a lot that staying in the hospital is actually going to do for you. And in fact, for older individuals, staying in the hospital is sometimes the wrong answer. Because what exists in hospitals besides doctors and nurses and techs? Germs, right? And what kind of germs? Really bad ones, because they get resistant to a lot of treatment. So if you go to the ER and you're worried about family members and they say, okay, after this workup, nothing serious, we're going to send you home, and you're like, what the heck are you talking about? I don't want my grandma to go home or my mom to go home. That's the reason why we make that decision, because we can't do much more. We can't fix dementia in the hospital, and we get worried that putting someone in the hospital is only going to increase their risk of developing things like pneumonia or other infections. So, that's one piece of the puzzle. The other side is when you are demented. We have a question over here, and then I'm going to give it to you, and then you're next after that. So when someone has known dementia and they're getting worse, that could just be the disease process progressing, or again, it could be that same thing. Is there something that pushed them over the edge? So getting back to your question, what documents do you need to bring? When was the last hospitalization if it wasn't at our facility? Because is this person suffering from a post-acute complication like pneumonia, what we call healthcare-associated pneumonia? Is this person suffering from an infection? Is there a mix of drugs, what we call polypharmacology? Right? Because a lot of times we don't know this, and You may take your loved one to an urgent care because they have a cough and they get started on an antibiotic. And that antibiotic may mix and cause problems with the other drugs that they're on. A lot of times these antibiotics affect what's called the metabolism of the drug, right? The way the drug is broken down, and it may stay in the system longer. And so that's a problem. Is there something that's going on with their kidneys? Is their kidney function getting worse? Is their liver function getting worse? Because most of these drugs are metabolized either by the liver or the kidneys, right? Or eliminated through those processes. So we look into those types of things, but most important, what's been going on recently? What's the diagnosis? Is it vascular or Alzheimer's? What are the medications? Perhaps most important than anything is that medication list. And who controls the medications? Who's giving the medications? Because it's not a great idea to have your demented family member taking their own medications because they don't remember. How many of you guys have experienced doubling or tripling up on a dose from a family member, right? We've all experienced that. So controlling access to the medications is important, knowing if anybody's had excessive doses of those medications. But other things too. Have there been falls, right? Has there been any type of injury or trauma? Anything along those lines we want to know about. And even seemingly minor things like, did someone burn their hand on the stove, right? Was there any of those types of things that occurred? So there's never too much information to share with the doc when you come to the hospital. There's always too little, which is really a possibility. So just think about being as comprehensive as possible. And one of the things that we always look for is the idea of the last known well period. Right? When was the last time they were at normal? They may not be normal compared to what they were when they were 30, right? But for their new phase of life, when was the last time they were normal? Because if things go on for a couple of days, right, it becomes a problem. So we're heading into the summer right now, right? It doesn't feel like it's been raining nonstop, but we're heading into the summer. What happens in the summer? It gets hot, right? And if air conditioning is not working, right? That's a problem because people can get hot, get overheated. They could have heat stroke. They could have, heat exhaustion. They can get very dehydrated. Is the air conditioning working where they are? We will often, if need be, admit someone to the hospital if the air conditioning is off, if the power goes out, right? Because we're not going to send someone back home only to have them deteriorate because they're living in an apartment or a house that's 95 degrees. Only set up for failure if that occurs. So we try to do all of these things, but sometimes you may get questions from the doctors that seem, why are you asking me about electricity? But this is why we do that. Are they on oxygen at home? Did the oxygen tank stop working? Can you get a new tank? Do you have a visiting nurse? All of these things we'll want to know. So I think the short answer to your question, Dr. Duren, is as much as you can bring, but at the very least, if you don't have access to anything else, either the medications themselves or the medication list. And one thing to keep in mind is that medication list has to be up to date. A lot of times, and I'm sure you guys could probably pull them out, you have a Xerox copy, right, or a paper copy of all the medications, and there's lines through this, and there's handwritten this, and all of that. Try to keep that as fresh and updated as possible, but make sure if there's any new medications that have been added at a recent visit, we know about those too, because they have implications on the other medications, even though we don't think about it. Does that answer your question? Great. You're fourth. Hang on one second.
Good morning or good afternoon. My question is, how do I go about filing a formal complaint against the hospital doctors in treatment? I've gone to customer service. I've done with the charge nurse, to the point my aunt had called the regional director of the hospital. So now they're coming in every 2 hours. What do you need? What do you need? I'm going to go further with this time, where I haven't in the past. So is there a better way for me to go about it?
That's a good question, a frustrating one as a clinician, because we don't want to think that this needs to happen, but it does, right? So there are always patient advocates, and there are ombudsmen, ombudswomen, I guess you could say as well, ombudspeople, available in every healthcare facility to be that liaison for patients. But foremost, it's when you're in the emergency department, if you go to generally the ones in the city, Detroit Receiving, Sinai Grace, Henry Ford, Ascension St. John's, they're residency training programs. So not only do you get doctors in training, there's always someone like me in the background overseeing those doctors. So typically what will happen when you go to the ER, you're going to get seen by a resident or even a medical student first. And hopefully they have compassion. Hopefully they're doing the right thing. Hopefully they're being comprehensive. And then the attending physician will get the presentation from the resident or the medical student, and in theory, they should be coming back in and directing the care. It doesn't always happen that way. One of the first things you can do is ask to speak to the attending physician. You can ask to speak to the charge nurse, right? The charge nurse is the nurse overseeing every nurse. They're the one in charge. And so that's a first step, at least for the care while you're there, because what you don't want to happen is receive poor care, things spiral downward, and then you're alerting everybody. We want to know as soon as possible that things aren't going the way they should. And one of the most important things that seems to fall down all too often is communication. You're sitting there for hours, nobody comes back and talks to you. Then you go ask and they think, oh, this person's a pain, right? They're coming, or you feel like I'm being a pain, but don't ever feel that way, right? Because the only question that doesn't get answered is the one you don't ask. So don't be afraid to be advocates for yourselves. It's really, really important. And we as physicians are your advocate, right? Especially the attending. I'm not here to defend my residents or to make my medical students look better. I'm here for you. And so if I don't know that something has happened, I can't do anything about it. So first, again, while you're there, ask for the charge nurse, ask for the attending physician. In addition to that, you can talk to a social worker, a patient advocate, an ombudsman. If none of that works, or you get to the point where they've been admitted, or they have been admitted, they're waiting forever, I'm sure that's an issue that comes up, right? Because the other side of what's happened after the pandemic, while compassion fatigue has set in, we've lost a lot of nursing and other healthcare personnel, and so people spend an inordinate amount of time in the ER. Even after you're admitted. We typically make a decision to admit or discharge a patient in 2 to 3 hours. Sometimes there's a delay on lab tests, sometimes there's a delay in getting CAT scan results. But the biggest delay is what's called boarding, which means that you've already been admitted, we've already discussed the care, hopefully someone's come to explain that to you, and then you sit, and it seems like you're waiting 2, 3, 4, even 5 days sometimes to get a bed upstairs, right? And that is horrible. And that's a big problem nationally. It's something that all of us as ER docs are pushing back on because we can't stand it, right? It's terrible. Who wants to sit on a stretcher that's uncomfortable in a hallway with lights on? How is your demented family member going to get better when they can't sleep, right? And so these are big issues. And those are things that while they're still in the ER, attending physicians, charge nurses can do this, but the hospital administrator, there's always a one on call, right? You can ask for that as well. Sometimes, if none of this is going anywhere, you can go to the website and look at the Department of Emergency Medicine and who's the chairperson, who's the person in charge of that department. Reach out to them, call the office and demand to speak to them. So, these are some of the more maybe some of the less transparent mechanisms to advocate and to reach channels. There are, like you're saying, the hospital administrators who you can reach up to, the customer service component of that. But sometimes that just gets lost in the whole thing. Now, we always have an option, if you will, to document in the system when something goes wrong. It's not a tattletale system, which a lot of people see it as. It's do the right thing system. Somebody did the wrong thing and we want to elevate it. Those concerns get very quickly attended to because once it's documented, then people want to address it, and they don't want to have too much documentation of problems because that indicates poor quality. So hopefully that helps address that as well. Not so much? Well, I want to continue on this because I want to make sure everyone in the room understands this. So tell me maybe a little bit more specifically what you were hoping I could answer in the question.
Pretty much how to now that he went through the emergency, had surgery, went through admission, and he's released. The treatment was so poor. Okay. To the point he had, just to give you one example, he had a PICC line that did not work when they released him from the hospital. So I had to watch him get poked about 12 times to get blood before I told them that was enough. They came in and put a port in his hip. After that, they sent in someone for the PICC line to put in another PICC line. Like, why are you torturing? Because to me, it comes down to torture. Yeah. He didn't get IV fluids for 4 days when his kidneys were failing and all he needed was fluid. So when he finally got fluid, within 1 day, his kidney numbers you know, there are things that are totally unacceptable. If I did not sit with him for 24 hours, my father kidneys would have shut down.
Yeah, you might not be here.
Exactly. So this needs to go further.
Well, you know, you're not going to hear too many doctors say this, but sometimes, unfortunately, you might have to make a call to a lawyer to get heard. And that's terrible to say. You know, one of the reasons that medical legal exists is because, as a profession, medicine has been granted, so to say, the privilege of self-policing. That shouldn't happen, because someone like me should say to the nurse on the floor, why hasn't this patient gotten fluids for 4 days? Right? If that doesn't happen, there's a failure at multiple levels of the system. And unfortunately, the only recourse is to get a lawyer involved, because once a lawyer gets involved, then everybody all of a sudden starts to pay attention. And I hate to say it that way, but that's just the unfortunate nature of this. The other side, you know, you can talk, like we said, to the customer service, but it's better to go as high up as you can. So if you know, any floor you get admitted to, there's a lead nurse on that floor. Ask to speak to the lead nurse. But, you know, some of this too is, it shouldn't take them 4 days to wake up, you know? And again, if you hadn't been there to advocate, your dad might not be here today, and I can sense the frustration. And on behalf of the system, I apologize. I don't know if it was the DMC where you were at, but, you know, this is part of the frustration in medicine in general, because we just don't have that compassion that it used to be. And you know, again, I apologize for that. And, you know, I know that may not be the answer that you wanted to hear, that you have to go talk to somebody, you know, to scare them straight, but that might be the right answer. And sometimes, you know, you're not looking for a settlement or anything. You're just looking for answers. And you want this not to happen to someone else. And I think that's the key point, right? Making sure that it doesn't happen to anyone else. So, you know, the other side of it too is, you, like I said, you can go all the way up to hospital presidents. If you search online, there's a lot of information, but it's not working. What's that?
They came into the room every day. That
After.
was how far it had gone until he was checked out.
So what did they do after he left the hospital? Nothing. Yeah. I think did you write names down and stuff? I think going back and following up with the highest person you spoke to, and letting them know that this is a horrible experience, and you'll never send your family member back there again, let alone recommend anybody else to go back there. They get very, you know, worried about those types of things. But again, I apologize that, you know, I don't have the magic answer for this, and I appreciate you sharing your story and expressing your frustration, which is very real. Hold on one sec.
Some of my questions were answered, but I'd like to know, I took someone to the ER, and I want to know, does an ER physician have the liberty of diagnosing someone with dementia? Because this guy said this person had dementia when in fact she had a UTI, which was mocking the behavior. And so things got really well, and I contacted Medicare, and I did get some responses from that.
So that goes back to what I started saying, the idea of delirium versus dementia. UTI is a very, very common cause of delirium in older individuals, and the ER doc who you spoke with may have not been the best ER doc. I don't know them or where they went, you know, what facility you went to, but sometimes ER docs, in an effort to see the 4 to 5 new patients coming in every hour, they do what's called anchoring, which is they get an idea in their head and they don't let go of it, right? So this person, this older individual came in, they must be demented.
Well, you also, my other point was too that he gave her a psychotherapeutic drug. Don't you have to have the consent of someone to do that?
It depends on what the drug is. If the person's a danger to themselves, immediately they're flailing about, they're pulling at IVs and doing that type of stuff, they might give a sedating medication so that they don't harm themselves. But to say that they're demented and sundowning, that's maybe what they mentioned. You guys are familiar with sundowning, right? You know, the end of the day, things, you know, go a little crazy sometimes. Either way, like I said, dementia is the final diagnosis after everything else has been ruled out. So in the case of your family member, clearly it sounds like they were delirious from a urinary tract infection and probably a little bit dehydrated. And before you go ahead and say they're demented, right, you can say they're in a state of acute delusion. We're going to treat the acute problem and fix it. I may need to give something to help settle down the situation, but I'm not saying this is a permanent diagnosis that needs to carry forth for the rest of their life, right? It may be heading that way. It may be something, right? But, as part of that workup, right, they should have done a CAT scan of that brain, make sure the brain looked okay, and look into all sorts of lab tests. But dementia is only added as a diagnosis after everything else has been wiped away, to make sure. 1 second.
Dr. Levine, since you are in somewhat of a position to make some changes, in the ER, when a demented person comes in, there needs to be, and this is just my opinion and my experience, there needs to be a dedicated group or a section for these people. Case in point, my husband, when I took him to the hospital, and I know these people, they're doing what they do normally, but you can't go up to them and just grab their arm and take blood. He snatches away, and then he's deemed difficult. And when I say something, then I'm difficult. But if you've got a dedicated group of people to handle the demented person who knows what to expect from them and their behavior, that might go further with, I'm done.
You're 100% right. And that's why I started talking about the American College of Emergency Physicians creating geriatric certified or accredited facilities. But it doesn't need to have that in order to train people properly on how to recognize and work with people who have dementia and family members. One of the things that's very helpful right off the get-go is not in an aggressive or any way, just say he's demented and he doesn't do well with people just snatching before you touch him. Yeah, before you go up and touch him, please try to introduce yourself. Please try to, which they should be doing anyway, of course, right? I agree, that point. But honestly, what happens in these facilities, right, is that people who work these jobs, they're overwhelmed. And I'm not making excuses for them. I'm just telling you like it is, right? They're overwhelmed. It's a very, very stressful environment. And what happens is you could be in the midst of a conversation with a family member, and all of a sudden you hear medical code or trauma code. I drop what I'm doing. I'm gone for an hour doing CPR and everything, and then coming back out, and you're mad at me because I left, and you don't know what's going on over here. I don't know what's been happening with, a nurse or a tech pulling on your husband's arm and all those types of things. And so it's a very uninformed environment. And I mean all around. I don't know what's happening here. You don't know what's happening here. And the good ER docs just know how to communicate that, right? And the team knows how to communicate when the doc has to get pulled away. I see you. I'll get to you in a second. When the doc gets pulled away and all those things. But I think being proactive and just, it's terrible to say, but don't ever assume that anybody knows anything, right? As bad as that might be. Right? There's that old odd couple, right? Don't assume because you make an ass out of you and me, right? But you know what? In this situation, just assume they don't know. And the worst thing you can do is tell somebody who knows something what they already knew. And if they get upset with that, they have weak fortitude, right? But beyond that, going in and saying he's demented, he doesn't do well when strangers come up. And so please make sure you keep that in mind with everybody that comes up. And even if you have to repeat it, because don't assume that the nurse is going to go back and the team's going to get together and say, oh, Mrs. So-and-so's husband's over there. He doesn't do well with this. Because even if that does occur, 4 hours later, there's a new team coming on, right? And you think the handoff rounds are effective, but they're not, right? And we try to put notes in the chart to translate that. But who has time to come in and read notes on 20 people that they just got signed out? So as terrible as it sounds, the best thing you can do as a caregiver is be the ultimate advocate and never stay silent. Because if you stay silent, you're going to end up getting disappointed for what doesn't happen. I can imagine you don't.
I did.
Good. Was it helpful? Was it received well?
Yeah. When I explained that, I said, don't come at him. He sees this as your attack.
Exactly.
So explain what you're going to do, and I get it. Take your blood, blah, 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 give me your arm.
Yep.
And it worked out. It's like, okay.
How old was the person you were educating?
60s, the person I was educating?
Yeah.
There's several of them. They could have been anywhere from 20 to maybe 40, 35.
Some of them haven't done it enough too, right? Because there's such challenges with the workforce. Exactly, right? But that's where the geriatric facility comes in. And if you think about it, if I'm an ER director, just to be honest with you, which I'm not, but if I were, and I'm designing what I'm going to spend my quote unquote budget each year on, am I going to have a special team of people who can only do one thing? Or am I going to have many people who can do many things? It's tough, right? And so what do? But you would expect they would all be trained, right? And that's the thing. And so, one of the things I think that could be very beneficial from this type of engagement, right, is getting advocacy to the emergency departments and have you guys come share your experiences, not just with me, right, but with leadership of other departments and even the physicians themselves, because they got to know, right? They got to know. But I'd say, whatever you're doing is the right approach, and if you would take it from, a 25-year-old kid who just graduated, with their degree as a patient care tech, they might not know, and take the opportunity to educate, again, as we were saying over here, so that in the future this doesn't happen to someone else's family member. So again, I apologize that you endured that.
I commend you because.
One second. I've had my hand raised up ever since you talked about the call. And you keep it going. Is there a reason?
I don't like you.
All right. That'll cost you $20. My only comment was when my loved one was in the hospital last year, he did not want the breathing tube down his throat. Intubation. But they gave it to him anyway. And when they gave him that, they also gave him fentanyl all the rest of the time he was in the hospital before he passed. I thought fentanyl was, why would they give an elderly person? He was 88 years old, and he didn't know what was going on, and I wasn't there because it was after, hours. And so when they gave him fentanyl, I was really upset, and no one would ever answer my question. We weren't married, but we were together for years. And so I just wanted to know, why would they want to give him fentanyl so much?
And thank you. I'm sorry to wait. I do like you very much, by the way. And I think this gets back to Dr. Duren's question. What other documents should you have? Advanced directives. So those are probably, if you remember nothing of this talk, remember those two words, because as ER docs, we fear the non-intervention for somebody we should have intervened upon. So if your partner didn't have advanced directives, we're going to assume that they want everything, even if they can't speak and advocate for themselves. So the side effect that kills people from fentanyl is it stops you from breathing. So by putting him on the ventilator, you've eliminated that problem. So the side effect that kills people from fentanyl is gone if they're on a breathing tube and on a ventilator. And oftentimes, if they have, I don't want to delve too deep into the personal, but if they have something that is life-threatening, right? If they have a big bleed in their brain or whatever it might be, I'm not saying that was the case. Sometimes we use fentanyl both to sedate the person and to make them more comfortable.
My question is, if you sedate them, of course their blood pressure is not going to never come up.
Right.
It only went up to 80, maybe 85, so, it's like...
Without knowing too much, they may have intubated him because he needed it to support him and then put him on the fentanyl drip, maybe in contact, and I don't know this, with palliative care, with some other component of the care continuum that said, he's not likely to recover from this, let's just make things comfortable. Again, I'm not saying that because I don't know the specific case. It's not generally indiscriminate why things are chosen. They're generally done for a specific reason. So have any of you guys lost family members with dementia or other medical conditions? Anybody had advanced directives and patients were, right, at the end, what you'll see is people will be put on morphine drips, and the idea is to make someone's transition to the next life easier and more comfortable. And so sometimes we'll do that as well, but that's done with the decision-making process to say this is unlikely to be recoverable, and that may happen, but that should never happen in isolation. That should always happen in communication. And I think, again, if you have someone you're caring for who expressed to you even 15 years ago, I don't want to be in a damn ventilator, Make sure you get that written down and documented. If you're not currently the caregiver, if you're not considered the medically, legally appointed caregiver, it's going to be very hard for you to tell me as a doc what to do if I don't know the relationship. I don't know that. It sounds like you were common law, probably married for many years, right? I don't know that. And so, whatever the situation is, it's better to get it all done before you show up in the ER than to think we're going to figure this out. And if you have an advance directive and you did it, let's say at Henry Ford on a last admission, and you're at the DMC or Ascension, I can't get that record. So print it out. Before you leave the facility, if you get admitted, ask for a copy of the advance directive so you always have it on you. Advance directive, medication lists, medical history, any other stuff. Sometimes it's a good idea to keep a log. Write stuff down in a book that you don't ever, lose, right? Okay, there was another question over here. Yeah.
As we mature, I don't say old, as we mature, what can we do for preventiveness? That's what,
Yep, that's a great question. So again, if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anybody else. And when you think about Alzheimer's dementia is a very specific type of dementia. It's something that involves the proteins in the brain, the way everything gets the wiring of the brain actually works. And there are new drugs that have come out for people who are at genetic risk, right? Because it is a genetic risk as well of Alzheimer's that you can use, which may prevent dementia. But for most people, the vast majority, they're going to have the vascular type of dementia. And vascular dementia basically results because you have damage to small blood vessels in the brain from things like high blood pressure, diabetes, smoking, high cholesterol. Those 4 things kill more people in this country than anything else, okay? Anything else by far. So if you have any of those conditions, control them. If you have high blood pressure, get a blood pressure cuff, right? They're covered by insurance these days. Even if not, they're, I'm not saying this is not a lot of money, but they're $20, $25. You can come to a mobile unit and we'll give you one for free, okay? Because that's how strongly we believe in this type of stuff. Get a blood pressure cuff. Measure your blood sugars on a regular basis. If your blood sugar is hovering around 200 and you have diabetes, you're at risk for getting dementia because the blood vessels get damaged by higher sugars. What I always tell people, think of if you eat a lot of candy, your teeth rot out. If you have a lot of sugar in your system, your blood vessels rot out. And that's why this happens. So also, you're never too old to exercise, right? It may hurt a little bit more nowadays, right? But you're never too old to exercise, even if it's a walk around the block, right? That's an important option. And weight loss is an important thing, but believe it or not, staying hydrated is also really, really important, right? When you go to the bathroom, if it's that dark color urine, you're dehydrated, right? You don't want to go to the bathroom every 10 minutes, right? We don't enjoy that either by drinking a lot of water, but try to get it so that your urine is either that light yellow or even clear, right? And that's a good thing to do that. But, take care of these chronic conditions that lead to risk and you'll have a much better chance of avoiding things like dementia.
Okay, so my question is, how old will a pre-existing, trying to explain it, medicine won't work for a pre-existing patient? We're being told that. My mother is 101, she'll be 102 in July, and sometimes the doctors tell us that.
Well, congratulations on 101. That means you're going to live to 101 too. So, what we try to think about is, what is someone's life expectancy, right? Does anyone have any idea what the life expectancy on average is in the United States? Good answers all around, right? It's about 78, okay? What is in Japan, it's 84, right? People in Japan tend to live longer. Why? They are more fit. They tend to eat a better diet. They don't have McDonald's on every corner and those types of things. And getting back to your question, eating right as well, right? Doing what you can to eat a healthful diet is really important. But when we look at this, we say, all right, somebody's 101, what's the best we could hope for? 102, 5, 10, 15, right? Guinness Book of World Records, you're 116 years old. And so it's not that medicine doesn't want to help people get there, but at 101, you're already in bonus time. You know what I'm saying? You're already well past, what the life expectancy would be. And so the question becomes, is doing a heart catheterization worth it? Right? One of the questions that comes up, is it worth doing a colonoscopy on somebody who's 100 years old? Well, maybe, maybe not. What if we diagnose cancer? What are you going to do? Are you going to put them through chemotherapy and take out part of their colon and give them a colostomy? Or are you going to say, all right, well, if they develop something horrible, let's just make them comfortable and surrounded by loved ones because, they've lived a long, healthy life. And so those are always the conversations that we think of. So when we think of prevention, right, prevention is really best. When do you guys think prevention is best? Now, I love that answer, whoever said it, but what's that? Thank you for that one. But really, right, if you want to, when do these things start to accumulate? In your 20s and 30s, right? You got to start early. So, one of the best things you can do is pay it forward to the next generation, right? And kids, grandkids, reminding them, right? Your kids who are, I don't know how old your children are. My son's 20, my daughter's 21, oops, and my son's 19, and I'm always talking to them about their prevention now. So, your kids go to the doctor and they come back and give you results, or they go to a mobile unit and get screened, and their blood pressure is 150 systolic. Now's the time for prevention. It's that conversation always has to be when you speak to youth, you speak to young folks, especially in the Black community where we know high blood pressure is rampant, right? This is the stuff today that's going to prevent tomorrow.
So we put her in the Boston study. We put her in a Boston study of centenarians. So they asked, where does she live at? Where does she work at? How many kids? Her whole lifestyle. They tell us she's genetically blessed. That's all they come up.
That's true, and that's what I'm saying for you. You're genetically blessed too. When we look worldwide, I'll come to you in 1 second, and I know you had a question, and then maybe we'll wrap up with that, if that's okay. That's amazing. So I say don't fix what ain't broken, you know what I mean? Like, whatever she's done in her life, she's doing well. And they're just looking at it to say, what can I do to make this any better? And it may not be anything they can do to make it better. Some people are just genetically predisposed to have healthy aging. That's a big source of study right now, healthy aging. Is it genetic? Is it lifestyle? Is it the combination thereof? The populations we know that live the longest, like I talked about the Japanese, but have you guys heard of the Mediterranean diet? Right? So what's great about that? It's olive oil, it's fruits, it's salads, it's legumes, it's nuts, right? I myself look great in a suit, thanks, Paula, but I'm pre-diabetic, believe it or not. I exercise 3-4 times a week, but I happen to love candy. Right? My daughter and I will sit there on road trips and eat candy all day long. I can't do it anymore, right? I'm on cholesterol medication now. I'm 53 years old. I'm doing what I've got to do. Right? But it would be very easy for me to put my head in the sand and say, you know what, I'm just not going to do, I'm not going to worry about it until it's a problem. Right? And I think that's all what's really important, just to think about it that way. My grandfather lived to 93, 94, and he drank Dewars every night, right? That was his method right there, right? And so, good for him, blended scotch versus single malt, right? But whatever. But some people are just predisposed to that. My grandfather, I feel like I have good genes. I could just sit back and say, I don't have to do anything, but no, I'm going to be proactive because I want to live a long, healthy life. And one thing to keep in mind beyond all of that, right, is that idea of a long, healthy life. Our goal should be wellness and health and longevity, not just living longer, right? Because medicine can keep people alive for a long time, but not in the best state of health. What you want to be is healthy throughout your lifespan, right? And so that's key. All right, I think actually we'll go here and then there.
Hi. First of all, I just want to compliment you. You are very candid, very honest, and that is rare. The whole fabric of medicine has changed so.
Oh, please clap. I love it.
But I am a healthcare professional, and I have seen the fabric of medicine change over the years. Everything that you've said is excellent. However, many people that have gray hair and that are older, they have problems prior to getting to the clinicians. you need to be, it must be mandatory that you educate the clerks and the people that these seniors see before they get to the doctors. And sometimes staff will look into the computer and they treat the numbers and the age, and they haven't even come in personal contact with the patient yet. So I know they don't teach listening skills in medical school, but they need to. But thank you. And I want a list of all of your geriatric mobile clinics so that I can tell everyone that I know to come there. Because seniors, you get 10 phone numbers to call, and at the end of that, they've forgotten what they were calling for. So, I mean, the whole system, post-pandemic, the changes in medicine, it's a lot for seniors. And I'm sorry to have taken so much time.
No, please. Thank you for your comments and thank you for your kind words. I think that's completely true. So one of the things that we've set up with our mobile programs is really, we're not just giving you information and disappearing. We're your advocate for the whole process. And we're here to make sure you get connected from A to B and C if you need it. But I do think there needs to be a come to Jesus, if you will. I guess we're in a church. I'm Jewish, I can say that. I'm a Jewish guy married to a Muslim woman talking about Jesus in the church, so it's perfect, right? but we need to have this hard look in medicine because the tail is wagging the dog right now. And why do they look at the computer all the time? Because that's how we get paid. You get paid by looking at the computer and documenting and checking the boxes rather than turning your chair around and actually speaking to the patient. But why does that happen? Because if I turn my chair around and speak to the patient, I got to stay for another 3 hours and catch up on my charting, right? And so there's all sorts of problems with the way we do medicine, but medicine has moved to a process of documentation and not a process of bedside caring. And so I think you're right, because the entire system is set up from the clerk who first sees you to the person who checks you out to maximize the billing for that encounter. And that's the wrong thing. And so one of the things that we're really pushing for is a concept of what's called bundled payments, right? Forget trying to document each thing and get paid for it. Do a bundle of services and pay me when the bundle's done, right? Do it in a way that thinks very differently, and don't make it so that I, the doctor who charges the most, need to be the one delivering care. If I bundle it, all that matters is the outcome, right? And the process can be different. I can have community health workers who are lesser trained, but from the community, who recognize the needs of the population, have lived the experience, and work with them. Have somebody who really sees the world the way you do, understands the world. They might not have, the gray hair, and I apologize for using that phrase. They might not have that, but they certainly understand the community from where you came from and can advocate. So I think your point's well taken. I wish I could snap my fingers and change this, but whenever people say to me, what are you doing these days who haven't seen me, I say, I'm changing healthcare. And it's with that in mind. So we're going to hand it over for one final question, if that's okay. I got to go give another talk after this, so I apologize.
This question might be a little bit off the beaten path, but you mentioned in terms of the Mediterranean diet. So just some of your thoughts. I've talked to some people who are stuck on this all-meat diet and no carbs. What's your thoughts on that?
So an important thing is to separate out all meat from protein. Right? So typically when we're taught about diets or told about diets, they talk about a 30-30-40 mix, right? 30% carbohydrates, 30% fats, and 40% protein, or you'll see it in various forms. The idea here is that carbohydrates, especially processed sugars, which actually are the carbohydrates we most get exposed to, are really detrimental to health. Not only do they cause problems and expose you to risk for diabetes, but the processed sugars themselves do damage to your body. And it also sets up a process where any excess calories above needs, especially when they come from carbohydrates, very quickly gets converted into fat. And so what they try to do with the Atkins diet or the protein-based diets is get more protein in your system. And when your body doesn't have carbohydrates, it actually breaks down fats first. You'll eliminate and get rid of proteins before you absorb them for energy to clean out some of the fat. And that's the idea behind this. But when you think about a protein-based diet, and I personally love a protein-based diet, although I think it's got to be balanced, right? You don't need to eat Skittles, right? But you can have a piece of bread here and there, right? But just don't, have an entire diet around carbohydrates. But when you think about a protein-based diet, think about what those proteins are. Is it red meat, which we know is problematic, right? Because it's got cholesterol in it and it's got fat on it, or is it fish? And when we talk about a Mediterranean diet, it's fish, right? It's things because omega-3 fatty acids and fish oils are also healthy. It's very complicated, right? There's no simple answer to any of this. And I think no matter what you're doing, the right answer is moderation in all, right? Never excess. I don't know if you guys know who Gary Player is. He's a golfer. He's been around forever. Guy's 85 years old and he's still swinging the club and dancing around on the greens. And what did he say is the secret to his success? He only eats half of what his portion is. And he's always done that, right? And I'm somebody, I grew up in the clean your plate club, right? Because who wants to waste food, right? And my poor wife is like, you make me eat all the meals and I've gained 10 pounds since I met you. I said, that's love, honey. It's not the excess food. You love me. That's why you gained weight. But, the bottom line is that, you don't have to clean your plate, right? You don't have to eat everything. And, the American diet and the American dining, the portions are just huge. It's crazy, right? There's an article in the Free Press today. You guys, anybody Lions fans in here? We're all Lions fans these days, right? So this lineman they drafted, 6'7", 365 pounds in the 4th round. He grew up in Canada, and he said the first thing he noticed when he got to the States is that the portions are bigger. Now, he's 6'7", 365 pounds, so he's ecstatic, right? But he said in Canada, we get little medallions of meat and 1 scoop of potatoes, and I love it here in America because I get to eat more. But the problem is he's a professional athlete, right? We're not, right? And so just think about that. One of the things that we've done, my wife and I, is we split a dinner, Not only does it make the check cheaper, right? But you split a dinner and you don't feel bloated, right? And the other thing to do after a meal, go take a walk, okay? More important than the meal itself, or equally important, is go take a walk. Doesn't have to be 10 miles. It can be around the block, right? But just get up and move, because once you do that, you start to burn off some of what you just ate. And who wants to go to bed feeling all bloated, right? And that way. And I say go to bed because now I go to bed at like 9 o'clock at night. So it's pathetic, right? My son was just making fun of me last night for that. But anyway, I just want to thank you, Dr. Duren, for this. And thank you all for your questions.
I know you have to leave in 2 minutes, but the question, my last question for the group is that what illnesses should we automatically bring our loved one to the ER? Because sometimes people come to the ER and they really need to see a primary care doc, but we may have issues with that. So what are they?
That's terrific. Definitely any change in mentation or mental status. ER. Fevers. ER. Okay? Because we never know what the source is, right? Especially with COVID. You guys probably dealt with hell with your family members, in and around COVID, between them getting sick and vaccinations and testing and exposures and all of that type of stuff. I think beyond that, if you're diabetic, right, or if they're diabetic and their blood sugars are rising and you can't keep them controlled, that's an important one. Blood pressure is a tricky one, okay, because blood pressure alone isn't a problem. It's what blood pressure does to the body. So just because someone's blood pressure is 180, you check it at home and everyone's freaking out, if they're unchanged, that's primary care, right? That's okay to talk to your doctor and say, we probably need to get an adjustment in medications. So I think those types of things are important, but you're caring for family members. Some of them are incontinent, right? And if you haven't been around, there was a caregiver, maybe the visiting nurse didn't show up, right? And you go over and your family member's, wearing a diaper and it hasn't been changed in 2 days, they're gonna be at risk for a urine infection, right? And so just keep all that in mind. Be vigilant about what could lead to something. But the bottom line is, as annoying as it is to go to the ER, there's no wrong time to go because we're here to help. You might not get the answer, which is admission to the hospital, right? But that's important. I'll say finally, sometimes one of the things that happens is that people just can't take care of their family member anymore. And they come to the ER and they want us to admit the patient to do placement in a nursing home. Right? And that's a real challenge because in order to get placed in a nursing home and get it paid for in this country, you have to be in hospital for 3 days. Right? And so it's kind of a messy situation. And so if you bring your family member for placement to the ER, they're going to be stuck on a stretcher, they're going to be stuck somewhere. And so you might be better off trying to work with a primary care provider to get some type of sedating medication and then work with the primary care provider or a nursing home directly to try to get placement. It's always very hard for us to do that from the emergency department.
Thank you very much. Can we give some recognition to our Dr. Levy and In terms of what's your website that you get provided that they can find out the names and locations of you gave a phone number. Did everyone get the phone number?
That phone number is my personal cell, so don't be giving that one out. No, I'm just kidding. It's waynehealthcares.org. You can go there and you can see our mobile health unit. The other thing you can do, if your family member is in a facility and you want us to come, we're happy to work with that facility. One of the things that we do is we come in and we vaccinate people. We come in and do health screenings. We're getting to the point now where we're working with some of the payers around homebound individuals who aren't in a nursing home, but they can't get out and get about. We have a home care team that will come to the house as well. Yes?
I have a senior daycare. What's the number that you need to come out?
1.
Did you say 1?
It doesn't matter. We'll come out.
You're going to be my new best friend.
But what I'll probably do is get you in touch with my team. But
I have more than 10.
yeah, that's terrific. Yeah, we're happy to come out because what we can do is vaccinate, we can do screenings, we can do a whole range of activity, and we're happy to do it.
Awesome.
Again, let's say thank you. I promised I'd get him out of here at a certain time. We want to honor that. Thank you again. We really appreciate everything you provided for us. Thanks.
Take care, everybody. So nice to meet you all. Thank you.
Again, I wanted to make sure that this conversation happened because so many of us take our loved ones to the emergency room and we have lots of concerns, lots of complaints. He provided insight on a number of different things on how you can file complaints, some of the issues and documents you need to bring to the facility with you, as well as other things that the other thing he probably meant to say was you also have to pack your own personal patience. Because the evening could go all night. I took Mom to the emergency room one night at 10. It was 6 o'clock in the morning before they saw us. Well, we decided to go home. It must not have been that serious, right? But please pack your patience and make sure that your loved one, and you take various things to stay warm because those places are cold all the time. Little things will make your experience better as a caregiver. So we're going to we do Lunch and Learns, Universal Dementia, every month on some topic related to caregiving and caring for a loved one living with dementia. We invite you back to our next one, which is next month, and our topic is caregiver burden and guilt. Because many caregivers struggle with the guilt of not being able to do all the things they think they're supposed to be able to do. They think there's this S on their chest, and it means super. I think it means that we're in the process of growing and developing and need to be kind to ourselves. So we'll spend time with that. We also have a boot camp coming up at the end of this month. If you're interested, it's a full day of training on Alzheimer's and caring about your loved one. Please feel free. In the back, there's a sign-up sheet if you're interested, and we'll call back and see, get you enrolled. We're going to stop the video because we're also live on Facebook. We're going to stop that, but we also have some giveaways. I want you to know that this event is currently funded by the Detroit Area Agency on Aging. So we want to give recognition to the funder for this event, as well as Triumph Church gives us the space for free. So we're always, as a small nonprofit, we're always looking for contributions. There's a jar in the back if you care to leave a gift for us to help support our work. We have 3 giveaways. Anybody want baseball tickets?